Welcome to RJ classes, and today's topic is the continuation of the force. So in last video we had studied force, unit, relation, etc. So in this video we are going to study about the contact and non-contact force. Non-contact force. So what is contact and non-contact force? And in the contact category we are going to study different types of the contact force, that is the frictional force, normal reaction force, tension force, force exerted by a spring, and the force exerted during collision. And in the category of the non-contact force we will study gravitational force, electrostatic force, and the magnetic force. So first start with contact force. So contact force. So contact force itself defined. Contact, that means whenever two objects are in direct contact with each other, in touch with each other, so force exerted between them at that time is said to be the contact force. That means in order to have a contact force, objects should be in contact with each other. So I am writing the definition: force exerted between two objects. Force exerted between two objects when they are in contact with each other, each other is called contact force. So that is the definition of the contact force. Now coming to the different categories of the contact force. First one, frictional force. First one is frictional force. What is frictional force? Simple, you have studied in previous classes. So frictional force exerted between the two objects when they are in contact with each other and they move over each other. Understood properly? Force exerted between the two objects, it is the force between the two objects, and when the objects are in contact, and not only that is enough, so they are in contact with each other and they move over each other. So under that situation the force between the two objects is said to be the frictional force, and that force always opposes the motion of the object, produces heat, etc. So that is the frictional force. And what is the cause of friction? Whenever one surface moves over the other surface, there are ridges and grooves between the two surfaces. And when they move or slide over each other, the ridges and grooves interlock each other. And as they interlock each other, that causes the friction or the frictional force. Friction always opposes the motion of the object. Friction causes wear and tear, and frictional force always produces heat. So that are the quality of frictional force. So first one, frictional force complete. Next one, coming to the normal reaction force. Now second one is the normal reaction force. Okay, suppose we have a surface and I keep an object on this surface having the object A. When we keep the object on any of the surface, the object exerts a force in the downward direction. Object always exerts a force on that surface in downward direction due to its weight. And whenever object apply a force in the downward direction due to its weight, surface also exert a force on the object to keep it in a static position in the upward direction perpendicular to it. So that force, the submissive force exerted by the surface on the object, perpendicular force exerted by the surface on the object to keep it in a static position, is said to be the normal reaction force. So remember, it is the reaction force. That means first of all force will get applied by the object. Object will apply the force on the surface due to its weight, and after that surface will apply a force on that object. That's why it is called normal reaction force. Next one is the tension force. Tension force. So suppose we have a string and I suspend a load from that spring. Whenever a load is क्या हो जाएगा suspended from a spring, So there is a force exerted by the load due to its weight. Load always exert a object always exert a force due to its weight on the क्या जाएगा any of the object means any of the surface. So whenever an object is suspended from the spring, object always apply a force in the downward directions, and to keep the string in the stressed condition, there is a application of force that is in the upward direction to keep it in stretched condition. So object apply the force in the downward directions, and there is the application of force on the string by the string, so in the upward direction to keep it in a stretched condition, and that force is said to be the tension force. So simply we can say, so the force exerted by the spring to keep it in a stressed condition, keep it in a stressed condition is said to be the tension force. So simply we can write it. Next one is the fourth one, that is the force exerted by a spring. So whenever suppose for a spring exert, there is the two condition to study the force exerted by a spring, that is the compressed, one is the compressed condition, other is the stressed. So suppose we have a string like this one spring, and we compress it, it will get like this one. So whenever we compress this spring, so in order to compress it we apply a force, and that force will be in this direction only. And whenever a force is released and whenever force is applied, obviously there is a displacement, and whenever the force is released, spring will get restore itself in the क्या जाएगा opposite direction, in the direction opposite to the force applied, and in the direction opposite to the displacement made by the object, and that will be equals to the displacement of the object. Only difference, magnitude of the two forces will be same, and the only difference, that means in order to compress it we apply the force in this direction, and to restore it apply the force in this direction, and magnitude of the both forces will be same. Again in the same condition, stretch. Suppose we have a compressed string and we stretch it. So in order to stretch it we apply at the क्या जाएगा one end is fixed, and we apply at the farther end of it a force in this directions, and because of that there is a displacement and it gets stretched. But whenever the force is released, obviously there is a displacement, and whenever the force is released, again it will get restored in this directions, and the magnitude of the restoring force and the magnitude of the applied force will be the same, only difference that they will opposite in direction. Next one, force during collision. Next one is the, suppose we have the two object A and object B. So whenever the object A and B due to the any cause collide with each other, suppose they collide with each other, so whenever they collide, we will exert a force on A, and A will exert a force on B, and due to that force A will get set into the motion, and also B will get set into the motion in this direction. The force was applied in this directions, and it will क्या जाएगा get set into the motion in this direction, it will get set motion into this direction. So this is the force during the collision. Now I'm coming to the non-contact force. So this was the contact force. Now coming to the non-contact force. Non-contact, again we are getting the definition from the terms only. Non-contact, whenever the two objects are at a distance from each other, and at that time if there is a force between them, that force is said to be the non-contact force. So non-contact force, I'm giving the definition: force exerted between two objects, when they are at a distance from each other. So that force is said to be the non-contact force. The first category of the non-contact force, that is the gravitational force. First one, gravitational force. Now gravitational force, The force of attraction between any two object, any two, that means any two object, between the pen means marker and the cap of the marker, between the क्या हो जाएगा mic and this marker, so between any two object, so it is the force of attraction only. The force of attraction between any two object in the universe is said to be the gravitational force. So suppose we have an object A and we have an object B. So if there is the attractive force, if they are the object, there must be an attractive force between the two objects, and that force will be termed as gravitational force. And that gravitational force, suppose karo this one is the m1 and m2 are the mass of the two objects, so that gravitational force is directly proportional to product of their masses, and that gravitational force is also related to distance between them. That means as much as the distance between them, as the greater the distance between them, there will be the less force. Means with the increase in distance, their force will get reduced. So that is the gravitational force. But keep one thing more. So if between the two objects, if one object is earth, so between the any two object, force of attraction take place. So between the two object, if we have one object is earth, so at that time this gravitational force will be called force of gravity. At that time it will be known by the different name, that is the force of gravity only in case of the earth. Otherwise in all the circumstances it will be called gravitational force. Next one is electrostatic force. So electrostatic force, that is electrostatic. It is the force about the charged particles. Whenever a charged particle apply a force on the other charged particle or a neutral particle, so that force will be called the electrostatic force. And electrostatic force are both attractive and repulsive in nature. Attractive, so if there is the force between the oppositely charged, that means plus minus, positive charge and negative charge, or negative charge and positive charge. So if there is the force between the oppositely charged particle, that will be called attractive. And if there is the also force between the charged particle and neutral particle, so under that situation it will be of attractive nature. But whenever there is the charge between the similar particle, there is the force of attraction, force between the similar charged particle, positive positive or negative negative, so they will be not attractive in nature, they will be repulsive in nature. So that one is the nature of the electrostatic force. And again, like this one, we have the magnetic force. Magnetic force, so again force exerted by magnet on other magnet or any magnetic substance, that is said to be the magnetic force. It is the force that magnet will exert on other magnet, not only on other magnet but also on the magnetic substance, so means that will be called magnetic force. And again, magnetic force are both attractive and repulsive nature. If the similar poles are brought together, that means if the similar poles are kept near to each other, that means they will repulsive in nature. And if opposite poles or a magnetic substance are brought near to the magnet, so under that situation it will be attractive in nature. So we understood all categories of forces, non-contact and contact forces, all categories. Now nature of characteristic of the non-contact force. Non-contact force has several characteristics. First one, that means they will act when the objects are at a distance from each other. Second one, they are both attractive and repulsive in nature. Some are only attractive, but there are some forces that are both attractive and repulsive in nature. And the most important thing, so the force will depend upon the distance between the two objects. So if there is a greater distance between the object, there will be less force, and with reduction in distance the force will increase, the magnitude of the force will increase. So this is about the contact and non-contact force. In next video we will cover the next topic.